Sora is officially dead. OpenAI pulled the plug on its video platform just months after launch, and with it, a $1 billion Disney deal has collapsed. The TikTok killer dream is over, and Sam Altman is essentially holding a funeral for one of the most hyped products in recent AI history. We'll get into what actually went wrong, what it tells us about OpenAI's product strategy, and whether the super app they're potentially replacing it with is actually a better bet. Plus, Linear's CEO declares the end of issue tracking as we know it. Meta releases a model trained on human brain scans that could change how we test product experiences, and the broader war on AI slop is heating up, with Wikipedia, Reddit, and Spotify all taking action. Stay tuned for all of that and more, and as always, if you enjoy the briefing, hit the like and the subscribe button. So let's start with the big story of the week, which is that OpenAI is scrapping its AI video product, Sora. The iOS app, the Sora.com web experience, and the API are all being shut down. The exact date hasn't been confirmed yet, but OpenAI says that it's coming soon. Speaking on X, they said that we're saying goodbye to the Sora app. To everyone who created with Sora, shared it, built community around it, thank you. What you made with Sora mattered, and we know that this news is disappointing. With the promise to share more soon, including timelines for the app and the API. So that last part, the API, is the bit that hasn't really got much attention because this isn't just actually a consumer story. Developers who had integrated Sora into production applications now can't access it programmatically through the official API. So if you'd built a product or workflow on top of Sora, you're now scrambling to migrate. The main alternatives people are pointing to right now are things like Runway Gen 4, Kling 3.0, and Google Bio, which is now arguably the dominant remaining platform with real scale. So if you cast your mind back to September last year, the Sora launch was genuinely a bit of a cultural moment. The app hit the top of the iOS App Store's photo and video category within a single day, and OpenAI was pitching it as a TikTok-style feed for AI-generated video. Altman was publicly encouraging users to splice him into famous scenes from pop culture, and Disney announced a $1 billion investment with plans to license over 200 characters. So what actually went wrong? Well, the numbers tell a pretty clear story. Downloads peaked at 3.3 million in November 25, but then fell 66% to just over 1.1 million by February 2026. The app was actively shrinking before it was even shut down, and on the revenue side, in-app purchases generated just 2.1 million across the product's entire lifetime. Meanwhile, on the cost side, video generation is structurally more expensive at every level, so resolution, duration, scene complexity, and the number of iterations each carry a compute cost. And the pricing model just made things worse, so OpenAI priced this just like it does with chat, as part of a flat $200 per month plan. Flat subscriptions work well for text and code, where the marginal cost per query is relatively low, but they work poorly for high compute costs, where a small number of heavy users can consume a disproportionate share of resources. It was essentially an unsustainable subsidy from day one, and Disney is now also out too. The replacement plan for all of this is rumored to be a desktop super app, which is where OpenAI could combine ChatGPT, Codex, and its browser into one combined single product. Sam Altman hasn't spoken publicly about this, and so what we're left with is the tweet from Fidji Seymour last week, in which she seemed to suggest that the strategy for OpenAI is to double down and build a super app and focus on the things that are working for the company by cutting out distractions. The coding market is where the pressure is most acute right now, and Claude has built a strong reputation among developers for coding tasks, and so that appears to be the battle that OpenAI is trying to win ahead of a potential IPO later this year. So overall, it looks like this was simply a case of the unit economics being broken from day one. And to their credit, OpenAI have cut this product rather quickly rather than letting it drag. But this experiment with AI-generated video hasn't come cheap. Analyst estimates put Sora's compute burn at roughly $10 to $15 million per day at peak usage, with the most cited figure around $15 million per day. Investors are unlikely to be too pleased about that, especially against a backdrop of ChatGPT's dominance, also being threatened by Claude and Gemini. OpenAI says it will redeploy its Sora teams onto robots. And all things considered, perhaps robotics is a better bet for OpenAI given the huge costs involved. But this isn't just an OpenAI story. It connects to something bigger, which is the wider war on AI slop. This week, the battle against the AI slopification of the web started to intensify on multiple fronts. So Wikipedia is banning AI-generated articles, Reddit is rolling out new initiatives to help users prove that they're human, and Spotify is testing a tool to help artists verify their music and fight off AI clones. Sora fits neatly into this wider picture. So, a product designed to make it very easy to flood a social feed with AI generated video was always going to struggle in an environment where the appetite for AI generated slop is seemingly declining. It looks as though there is a growing sense that people want authenticity, and some of the platforms are starting to respond to that. What do you think about OpenAI ditching Sora? Let me know in the comments below. But while the web may be shifting towards human centricity, AI agents are continuing to disrupt the product development process. This week, Linear's CEO published a piece declaring that issue tracking, as we know it, is now finished. The argument is that issue tracking was built for a handoff model of software development, so in other words, a process where a PM scoped work, the engineers picked it up later, and the system used prioritization, negotiation, and workflow to bridge the gaps. With AI engineering agents now installed on over 75% of Linear's enterprise workspace, Linear believes the next system is not built around handoffs, but around context and agents. And the product response from Linear is the Linear Agent, which is a built-in agent with access to everything already living in your workspace. So things like threads, your backlog, customer requests, and your codebase. It can synthesize context, make recommendations, and take actions without you manually piecing everything together. They've also launched a feature which uses skills, which is Linear's way of letting teams save AI workflows that worked well and then reuse them with a single command. So for example, if you've built a workflow where the agent reads your backlog, groups themes by customer impact, and drafts issues for the top 3, you can actually save this as a skill on the next sprint and then use it as a slash command. Linear says that Coinbase is one of the first companies to adopt an agent-first approach, and this was outlined in a post on Linear's blog. In it, Coinbase's head of engineering explained that back in January this year, he did something pretty radical. So he asked his entire engineering organization to delete their development environment and to write 0 lines of code for 2 weeks. So the goal here was to figure out how work actually gets done when agents are doing most of it. What he'd figured out before the experiment is something I think a lot of teams haven't confronted yet, and he calls this the hidden tax of asking questions. So most progress at companies happens through questions. Someone's unsure about how something works, they ping a teammate and they get an answer. It feels frictionless, but according to Chintan, the head of engineering, answering questions is actually pretty expensive. It pulls someone out of deep work, forces a context switch, and burns focus that's hard to recover. At a company of thousands, with everyone taking the path of least resistance, this tax compounds into something that really slows everyone down. His observation was that he didn't think that developers were slow, he thought that companies were slow. The results of this 2-week no IDE experiment was that development at Coinbase is now essentially continuous. Not because people are working around the clock, but because agents are. So engineers wake up, they review the PRs that agents generated overnight, spin off some new agents for the day, go deep on the complicated stuff themselves, and then review again in the evening. The metric that Chintan tracks for all this is autonomous operation time. In other words, how many minutes can an agent run without a human stepping in? And he says that that number keeps climbing. So as the lines between product management, engineering, and design roles start to collapse, so too do the lines between the tools themselves. After the announcement from Linear, some have asked the fairly legitimate questions around whether Cursor could also bolt on some product features, or could Claude Code and Figma do the same? If context is all that matters, then the traditional boundaries between these tools may start to blur even more. One area that could transform fundamentally is the research process. And here's one development that I think has been pretty underreported this week. So this week, Meta released Tribe V2, which is a foundation model that predicts how the human brain responds to video, audio, and language. So this model is trained on over 1,000 hours of brain scan data across 720 people, and it can simulate how different parts of the brain activate in response to a given stimulus. So I'll pop the link to this experiment in the description, but essentially, a model like this could be quite helpful for product teams in the future. So right now, if you want to know whether a design, an ad, or an onboarding flow is genuinely engaging, then your options are surveys, behavioral metrics, or lab studies. But in the future, if product teams can run user journeys or new features past models that have been trained on human brains, it could simulate how different people's brains might respond to these workflows. It is slightly unsettling, but the idea is pretty remarkable. Now let's finish with some data and trends for the week, and I'll pop the link to these in the description for you. And we'll start with this story, which is that Cisco's VP of Operations said the company replaced a presentation software tool with its own AI agent, saving nearly $5 million annually in license costs. So if you take a look at this graph, you'll see that Cisco says they've already replaced one tool, which is saving them $5 million, which is a presentation tool. And they've targeted other tools which could save them even more money, ranging between 50 and 200 million. Cisco's VP of Operations says that the question that he's asking right now is, which of these applications can become automated workflows where we don't need this app anymore? This, he says, is the question that every software business should be worried about right now. And of course, the traditional argument against replacing SaaS products like this has been that they struggle to maintain themselves. But this week, Ramp said that it has built a self-maintaining codebase using AI agents. Ramp's engineering team automated production monitoring so thoroughly that their system now catches bugs faster than users can report them within minutes of a problem occurring. They did this by wiring AI agents, their internal tool called Ramp Inspect, to Datadog monitors. When a monitor fires, the agent reproduces the issue in a sandbox environment, generates a fix, and opens a pull request, all without a human prompt. The system has scaled from 10 handwritten monitors to over 1,000 AI-generated ones in weeks, which is roughly one monitor per 75 lines of code. So the traditional argument against self-building SaaS clones has typically been the maintenance overheads. But if self-maintenance becomes the norm, what does this mean for the future of SaaS? And on that note, I'll leave it there for this week. Thank you very much for listening and watching. I'll be back next week with another briefing.